Hey y'all, welcome to Mystery, Murder, and Mayhem. I had planned on a brand new episode, got it written, researched, all that good stuff, and I'm sick. I've gotten sick after my kids got sick, of course. It's a sinus infection. Starting to feel a little bit like bronchitis. But the episode that I had planned for tonight, it was pretty lengthy. So I don't really feel like I can successfully record that much today. So what I'm going to do is just do an old episode. Actually, it's 2 episodes, but it's about Aleister Crowley, and I hope you'll enjoy listening to it again. Y'all have a good week.
Good morning and welcome to episode 32 of Mystery, Murder, and Magic. We're your hosts, Andrea and Alex.
Yay.
Yay!
Yay.
Yay! Now, there's not a whole lot to talk about from our personal lives this week.
Nope.
We didn't really do anything exciting. Alex worked.
I worked.
And I finished my finals.
Final.
For school. My final exams for this semester. Oh, but I do have to brag on myself for just a second here. Right now, my GPA is a 4.0.
Whoa.
I know, right? I'm pretty excited about it. Now, I'm just going to say that if I can achieve something like this at 49 years of age, after having a mild stroke, never say you're too old to go back to school, because I'm living proof right here. So, how's your world, Alex? Work going okay?
Yes, so
You like your job and everything?
Yes, I like my job and everything. It's a fun job.
Yeah, I think it's really cool that you get to be around so many animals all day.
Yes.
I'm kind of jealous because we don't have enough pets.
Yeah.
And speaking of pets, today
is
Bridget's 3rd birthday.
She's 3.
Bridget is our bearded dragon. She's 3 years old
3.
today.
She's this many.
She's so cute. She's just so cute. But anyway, let's get into this week's episode. Now, I was having a really hard time. All week I was racking my brain trying to figure out something. So I sent your sister a text and I was like, tell me something to talk about this week because I'm drawing a blank. She said, well, y'all haven't talked about Aleister Crowley yet. So guess who we're talking about this week?
Aleister, yeah, that guy.
That guy, we sure are.
Intro.
Mystery, murder, and heroes,
Alright. Well, Alex, okay, when I say Aleister Crowley, do you know who I'm talking about?
Kind of, not really.
Well, you'll know. And I feel there's so much about him that it's going to be like a 2-part thing. So today's part uno.
Part 1. You did.
I said uno.
You did.
Held up 2 fingers. Alright, so yeah, I'm still stupid. Oh, nothing's changed from last week. Alright, so I know most of y'all have at least heard his name, Aleister Crowley. But what do you really know about him?
Nothing.
Nothing. He was a pretty interesting fella, and he really thought outside of the box, but that's putting it pretty mildly. And I do have to say that his life was almost like a real-life soap opera with lots of plot twists. Now, you know, he's not a recent person. Like, he was born in 1875.
That's a long time ago.
But he wasn't born as Aleister Crowley. He was born as Edward Alexander, just like you, Alexander,
cool.
Crowley, to a very devout Christian couple. Now, he wouldn't come to be known as Aleister until later in his life. But when he was 8 years old, his parents sent him to H.T. Habershon's
We can't speak today.
Evangelical.
Angelica.
Pickles. Christian boarding school. And as he was growing up, he rejected his parents' religious beliefs, and this caused he and his mom to have a very strained relationship. She would even call him the Beast.
The Beast.
Like the devil beast.
The Beast.
Yeah. And he liked that she gave him that nickname. So, in March of 1887, he was 11 years old,
11.
and his father passed away from tongue cancer. That,
Okay.
you know, I know about any part of your body can have cancer, but I just never really thought about your tongue having
All right.
cancer. But, he said that was a major turning point in his life, and even though his father was a devout Christian, and, you know, like I said, Crowley was like rebelling against all that, he called his dad his hero and his friend. Now, at this point, he was sent to Ybor Preparatory School, and Ybor was ran by the Reverend Henry D.R.C. Champney. We're going to just say that's his name, okay?
Yes.
Champney. Okay, and when Crowley became a troublemaker at the school, Champney was quick to dish out the punishment, and soon Crowley referred to him as a sadist.
Oh, God.
Punishment included being put in solitary confinement, being fed only bread and water, and other inhumane punishment. So it was like prison at that school. Now, he started having health problems as a result of the stress from these punishments, including kidney ailments. And to make things worse, there was boys at that school that would pick on him, I guess because he was just so different than everybody else, and they would punch him in the kidney area. Just basically because he was the outcast of the school. He wasn't your typical Christian boy, I guess you could say. But it wasn't long, and he left that school and studied at Malvern College and Tunbridge School. But Crowley didn't like either of those either, and he ended up being taught by private tutors. But it was Christian teachings, and he rebelled even more by pointing out the inconsistencies in the Bible. And he also rebelled by smoking, close your ears, all it is, masturbating, that was so awkward, and having sex with prostitutes.
That's...
Yeah.
Oh.
And as a matter of fact, having sex with prostitutes was how he contracted gonorrhea.
Of course.
Now, despite all of his family's efforts to raise him as a proper Christian boy, he rebelled every chance he got, and in pretty much any way that he could. One thing that did interest him was mountain climbing, and he was really good at it.
Mm-hmm.
Before he enrolled at Cambridge University, he had already climbed Beachy Head and most of the Burmese Alps. Now, it was at this time when he enrolled at Cambridge that he changed his name to Aleister. It was October of 1895, and he began a 3-year course studying philosophy. And during this time, he continued pursuing his many interests, and those interests included chess. And as a matter of fact, he became the president of the school's chess club and mountain climbing. He returned to those Alps from 1894 to 1898, and because of his accomplishments there, he became somewhat famous to the alpine mountaineering community that was there. And he also embraced his love of literature, and by doing this, he wrote many poems, and a lot of those appeared in student publications at Cambridge. In December of 1896, Aleister was on holiday in Sweden. And while he was there, he experienced his first major mystical experience. Many biographers believe that the experience was brought on by Aleister's first same-sex experience, which in turn brought him to realize that he was bisexual. I'm telling y'all, there's many facets to this man. Okay, he was a very sexual person, and while at Cambridge, he engaged in sex, mostly with female prostitutes. And from one of those during that time, he contracted syphilis. So now at this point, he's on his second STD. Homosexual activities and relationships back then were illegal during that time. But this didn't stop him from engaging in them, because in October of 1897, he met a guy by the name of Herbert. You just threw me off. Herbert Charles Pilot, who was another very interesting person. Now, these two guys, they entered a relationship, but it wouldn't last very long, because Herbert didn't share Aleister's interest in Western esotericism. You know what? I need to just shut the hell up. Esotericism. Esotericism. Okay. Esotericism. That's the word. Okay. It is said that Aleister regretted the relationship ending for quite a long time. For a while, Aleister considered a diplomatic career, but he got really sick around that time that he met Paulette. And all the things that I've read, it didn't say what he became sick with. I don't know if it was the syphilis that he had got or something else. But anyway, it made him reconsider how life can be taken away so short, and he began pursuing an interest in the occult. He started reading books like The Book of Black Magic and Pax by A.E. Waits and The Cloud Upon the Sanctuary by Carl von Eckhart Schausen. Yeah. And this fanned his flame of his interest even more. In July of 1898, he left Cambridge without a degree, even though his grades were very good. His grades were actually at the top of the class, and he decided to leave there without
smart boy
a degree. Now, the following month, he traveled to Switzerland, where he met up with a chemist by the name of Julian L. Baker, and the two talked at great length about their interest in alchemy. Once they were back in London, Baker introduced Aleister to his brother-in-law, George Cecil Jones. And Jones was a member of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Now, the Golden Dawn had only been founded just 10 years before this time. And in November of 1898, Aleister was initiated into the Golden Dawn by Samuel Mathers, the group's leader. Now, soon after that, Aleister moved into his own flat, and he invited another member of the Golden Dawn by the name of Alan Bennett to move in with him and become his personal magic tutor. Now, Bennett taught Aleister ceremonial magic and the use of ritual drugs, and they would perform rituals of the Goetia. I don't know, Goetia. Y'all, I'm sorry, I cannot pronounce nothing today. Now, and they did this together until Bennett left to study Buddhism in South Asia. The next year, Aleister bought a house on the shores. And now, I do need to mention this too. When Aleister's dad died when he's little, he left all of his money to him, basically. He got a really big inheritance, and this is where he's getting his money to do all this traveling and schooling and mountain climbing that he does. But anyway, so that next year he bought a house on the shores of Loch Ness in Scotland, and he really developed a love for all things Scottish. He even wore traditional Highland clothes pretty much everywhere he traveled, including England. Now, during all of this time, he did continue to write and to publish poetry. And as a matter of fact, one of his most critically acclaimed pieces, which was Jephthah, was written during this period. Jephthah.
Oh.
Aleister continued to progress through the levels or grades of the Golden Dawn and was soon ready to enter the Second Order. But because he was bisexual and he had this racy lifestyle, I guess you could say, he had developed a bad reputation. And soon that he had several arguments with important members of that group. And they actually refused to initiate him into the Second Order, so Aleister went to see Mr. Mathers in Paris, and Mathers admitted him into the Adeptus Minor grade. Now, because of this, there was like a rift that developed between Mathers and the London members of the Golden Dawn, because they were unhappy with, for one thing, with what he had blah 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 blah. He had went behind their backs and initiated Aleister into this, and another thing, he was very domineering, and so he just caused big problems, you know. Well, Mathers decided that they needed to seize a temple space that the London group was using, It was in West Kensington. So under Mather's direction, Aleister and this mistress who he had, her name was Elaine Simpson, and she had also been initiated into the order. They attempted to seize it. Now, it ended up having to go to court, and the judge sided with the London people because they had already been paying the rent on it. And in the end, Mathers and Aleister was separated from the group. They basically just kicked them out because of all of that. And that brings us to the year 1900.
1900?
Now, in 1900, Crowley, Aleister, whatever you want to call him, settled in Mexico City after traveling to Mexico through the United States. Well, while he was there in Mexico City, he started a relationship with a local woman, and he developed a love for that area. And while he was there, he was still practicing that ceremonial magic that he had learned. And while he was there, he was initiated into Freemasonry and wrote a play and a series of poems. He even climbed mountains while he was there, but in one of his adventures to the top of Colima, he had to cut it short because it was a volcano, and that volcano was about to erupt. So I guess it was a good thing that he decided, hey, I ain't going no further. We got to get off this mountain. So I'm going to say get off this mountain. When he left Mexico, he traveled to San Francisco, and then he sailed to Hawaii. Well, while he was on that ship sailing to Hawaii, he had a brief affair with a woman by the name of Mary Alice Rogers, and she was married. Apparently, he was very smitten with Mary Alice because he wrote a series of poems called Alice and Adultery. And I just wonder if her husband ever figured out what she did while she was on that ship. And especially if he had any clue that that book of poems was anything to do with his wife.
Exactly.
Now, from here he traveled to Japan and Hong Kong, where he met up with Alan Bennett. The two spent some time together before Aleister decided to tour India, and while he was there, he devoted himself to the Hindu tradition of practicing Raja Yoga. He spent a lot of time studying and still writing poetry. He also contracted malaria while he was there and had to recuperate from the disease in Calcutta and Rangoon. And he stayed sick a lot, and I just wonder if maybe he had like a suppressed immune system, because it just seemed like he got sick an awful lot. Now, some of his mountain climbing buddies, they soon joined him in India, and they set out to climb K2, which at that time had never been done. While on their journey to the top, Aleister suffered from the flu, malaria, and snow blindness. And several of the others in the group got sick during the trek. And once they reached 20,000 feet, they decided to turn back. I guess they were all just too sick to keep going.
Yeah.
Now, in November of 1902, Aleister found himself in Paris, where he hung out with his future brother-in-law. The guy's name was Gerald Kelly, and he was a painter. Now, through Kelly, Aleister became well known in the art scene in Paris. He wrote a lot more poetry while he was there, and this poetry was published as Rodin and Rhyme because they were written based on the work of a sculptor named Auguste Rodin. In August, I've got fall on my brain, y'all. In August of 1903, Aleister married Gerald Kelly's sister. Her name was Rose Edith Kelly. And he did this, it was kind of like a marriage of convenience, because he did this so that she wouldn't have to marry a guy that she was in this arranged marriage situation with. Well, that marriage pissed off her whole family, and it ruined his friendship with her brother Gerald, that, you know, those two had been friends. Well, the couple honeymooned in Paris and Cairo and Ceylon. Well, Aleister really fell in love with her, and to prove his love, he wrote her a series of love poems. When they arrived in Cairo, it was February, and they claimed to be a prince and princess and rented an apartment. In one room of the apartment, Aleister set up a temple and started invoking Egyptian deities. During this time, Aleister said that Rose would become incoherent and would tell him, "They are waiting for you." finally, in March, Rose was able to explain that the they that she was referring to was the god Horus. And on March the 20th, she claimed that the equinox of the gods has came. Then she led him to this nearby museum and showed him exhibit 666.
Oh my god.
The name of that exhibit was the Stele of Ankh. Okay, we're just going to call it the Stele, okay? Because, like I said, I am not too good at pronouncing any of these. Because, you know, my southern backward accent just destroys the beauty of all of it. And anyway, I'm sorry about that. Now, Aleister thought this was very important because of the Christian belief about the number 666 being the number of the beast. And if you remember, his mom called him the beast when he was young. So he thinks it's all coming together.
Yes.
And it could have been, you know. That following April the 8th, Aleister said that he heard a disembodied voice. And that voice it told him that he was Alwas. And Alwas is the messenger of Horus. Aleister wrote down every single thing that the voice told him over the next 3 days. And this is what would become known as the Book of the Law. The book said that mankind was entering a new age and that Aleister would be the prophet of this new age. A supreme moral law was to be introduced, and that would be the quote, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law," end quote. Also, people would learn to live in tune with their own will. Now, this book and its philosophy within it would become the backbone of Crowley's religion. And this new religion was called Thelema. Now, I just want to say something before we go further. And it's very random. Okay? And I have these random thoughts when I'm doing this, like, research and writing episodes. But if you've ever watched the TV show Mama's Family, you know that Mama's name is Thelma, which is similar in spelling to Thelema. And Thelma's maiden name was Crowley. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe I can come up with a whole new conspiracy theory. But I don't know. I mean, I'm going to look into it, though. Alright, well, back to the topic. I know, my brain... This is how my mind works, y'all. Okay, I go from Aleister Crowley to Mama's Family. But anyway, at first, Aleister didn't know what to do with the Book of Life. Or the Book of Law. Gosh, I am so stupid today. The Book of the Law. And he even hated it. He disregarded the instructions that the book contained and asked him to perform. And one of the acts that it asked him to perform was to steal the exhibit 666 from the museum. It also wanted him to build a fort-type structure on an island and translate the Book of the Law into all the languages of the world. But at that time, he ignored that, and he sent copies of the manuscript to several occultists that he knew. Then he put it away and ignored it. Not long after that, the newlyweds returned home, and soon Aleister started thinking that Mathers was using magic against him, and so then their friendship started deteriorating. In July of 1905, Rose gave birth to the couple's first child, and it was a daughter named Lilith. While Rose was recuperating from the childbirth, Aleister wrote Snowdrops from a Curate's Garden, which is what we now call porn. I mean, whatever floats your boat, y'all, but porn while you're recovering from popping a baby out is just a bit odd. I don't know. But it was also during that time that Aleister formed his own publishing company and named it the Society for the Propagation of Religious Truth. And he named it that to be a parody of a publishing company called Society for Promoting Christian Knowledge. Over the next few years, Aleister and a group of mountaineers attempted to climb a mountain called Kanchenjunga. It was known as the world's most dangerous mountain, and it was located in the Himalayas in Nepal. Shortly after the group began their trek, they just started having these arguments amongst each other, and they kept saying that Aleister was very reckless, And at one point, a mutiny basically broke out. The climbers abandoned Aleister and started heading back down the mountain. And he warned them not to do it because it was nighttime and it would be dangerous.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't heed his warnings, and several of them were killed in an accident. And you know who got the blame for it?
Who?
Aleister.
No.
He blamed, they blamed him for the accident killing these people, yet he had warned them. But I don't believe he got in any trouble from that. Now, after that, he traveled to India, where he took part in some big game hunting. And soon, his wife and daughter met up with him in Calcutta. But apparently, 2 men tried to mug him, and he shot them, but it didn't kill him, so they had to, leave India because of that. Now, Rose and Lilith returned to Europe while Aleister went on to Shanghai to visit his friend Elaine Simpson. Now, she was the mistress that he had back when he tried to overtake that temple in London or wherever they were at. It was in England. Now, she was fascinated by the Book of the Law, and the two performed rituals in an attempt to invoke Alwas. Now, when Aleister finally arrived back in Britain, he was informed that his little girl Lilith had died from typhoid while and he blamed Rose for Lilith getting sick because Rose had apparently developed a really bad drinking problem, and I guess he thought she just wasn't really taking care of it, the baby. But anyway, his health started going downhill, and it was from all the emotional distress of losing his daughter, and soon he had several operations. During this time, he had several affairs. One was with an actress, and one was with an author. But in February of 1907, Rose gave birth to the couple's second daughter, Lola Zaza. And it's interesting to note that the actress that he had the affair with went by the nickname Lola. Now, ain't that some crap? He named
Lola.
his kid after somebody he'd had an affair with. Now,
That's weird. No,
I know, who would actually do that? Well, let me just say that I had an affair and I'd like to name our daughter after that person. Well, my dears, this is where we're going to cut it off for today.
right now.
Right here.
Right now.
We've absorbed a bunch of knowledge today.
Yes.
And I think our brains need to just rest.
Just a little bit.
Are you okay over there, Alex?
I don't know. I feel
I think
dead.
I need to stretch and a nap.
Yes. Indeed.
A nap would be good right now.
It really would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So y'all come back next Monday and we're going to finish up talking about Aleister Crowley to see what happens next. And like I said, it's almost like a real life soap opera. But also y'all don't forget that on Wednesday there's going to be a new episode of the Midweek Mini, and on Saturday there'll be a new episode of the Weekend Weird Files. Y'all have a good week. Come back and listen to us again soon. And we'll see you then. Good morning and welcome to this week's episode of Mystery, Murder, and Magic. We are your hosts, Andrea and Alex.
Yay. Episode.
Yay.
Yay.
And today, today we're going to finish up talking about Aleister Crowley. But first, Alex,
Yes.
I want to talk about Saturday night.
Oh yeah. I forgot for a second.
Oh, yeah!
We went somewhere.
Yeah, so Saturday night,
Saturday night.
Alex, Nicholas, and myself
Yes.
went to wrestling in
We
Union.
went to a wrestling event.
The promotion is called Pro Wrestling Union. And yeah, it's like a local organization, but there's like some really talented wrestlers
Yes, there is.
in that promotion. It was crazy fun. Like, it was stormy on the way over there, so I was like, I don't know what's going to be like dodging
We're gonna
tornadoes,
die.
or if we're going to be watching wrestling, or I mean, if a tornado could have came, that ring was so big, they probably could have fit everybody under it to protect them from the tornado.
Probably.
That sucker,
It was huge.
it was huge. It stood up off the ground. And anyway, we just kind of sat in the car until the storm passed. But
They were lazy.
yeah, we were late. Well, no, it was just that I wasn't
I
about.
didn't want to die.
I didn't want to get struck by lightning. So, but the matches were like so awesome. We were sitting on the front row.
Yeah.
We sat on the front row, and so Alex got to see his longtime favorite, Dion.
Yes.
Dion Johnson.
Yes, indeed.
Alex has been a fan of his since he was like 9 years old. And
Well,
let
we
me
don't
just
know.
tell y'all what a cool guy Dion is, okay?
Yes.
You know, at one point when Alex was
Young lad.
a young lad, yeah, around, it was before middle school, I believe.
Yeah.
He kind of was struggling a bit in school. He kind of was unmotivated, and I didn't know what to say or do because I had already said and did so much. So I reached out through Facebook to Dion. I told him what was going on with Alex. And let me tell you what Dion did. Dion wrote
A note.
about,
know.
I don't know, it was about a 4-page letter
Yeah.
to Alex and mailed it to him. And I don't remember what he said exactly in there, but it was very encouraging to Alex, and apparently whatever he said got through to him, because he definitely turned himself around. So, you know, I have to just say thank you, Dion. I don't know if you ever will hear this, but thank you, Dion. You're an awesome dude.
You're a cool lad.
And I'll never ever forget that act of kindness. But it probably was a small thing to him, but it was just one of those big things that stand out in your lifetime, you know. Now, also, back when Alex was about 9 years old, I took a picture of Alex holding Dion's championship belt. Well, last night, they crowned a new champion with a brand new title. It's called the PWU Carolinas Champion. And before the Fatal 4-Way match for that championship, there was an intermission, and during it, you could, like, have your picture taken with the new belt. Let me tell you, that belt's so pretty.
Yeah.
Like, I think I like it so much because, like, right, that front plate on the belt is the state of South Carolina, and it's just so pretty. So you could go up, get your picture made with it. So what I did was take Alex's picture with that belt, and we were in hopes that Dion was going to win that title, so, you know, it would mean even more to him. But that didn't quite work out because not long after that Fatal 4-Way match got started, Dion got counted out, and it was funny because big shout out to Darren Vander for grabbing the chair. Look, when he grabbed that chair beside your brother, Nicholas looked at me like, what's about to happen? But he whacked Dion in the back with that, and they took off. It was hilarious.
It was funny.
It was funny. But the other people that was in the match, okay, so it was Dion, a dude named Bebop.
Bebop's cool.
It was a guy they called the Anomaly, and I think his last name was Morgan.
Yeah.
And there was a guy named, I think his name's Drew Hood. I do know that when they announce him, they say DH and H Hood. I mean HD. DH and HD. It's a good thing I don't do the ring announcements because I just screwed it up. Of course, he was making everybody do the ring announcements over last night anyway. So, anyway. Long story short, because I know y'all aren't here for the wrestling stories, but Bebop won, and it was a great match.
Yeah.
Now, before I wrap this up, I do want to give a big shout out to, like I said, Derek Vanderford. He is an awesome manager. Like, it just suits him. Like, him running his mouth. as a manager. It kind of made me think, in some ways, of Don Callis running his big mouth, but not quite. And you know how I feel about Don Callis. Well, since I kind of know Derek, I don't feel that hate towards him. So,
Yeah.
But I mean, he just does the manager thing so good. And Cole Maccabee. Now, I don't know if any of y'all are listening, but if you are, I gotta give you mad respect, because like, you're putting on, and all of y'all are just putting on this awesome thing for the area. You know, it gives us something to do on some Saturday nights.
Yeah.
And it's entertaining. It's a safe environment unless you're in the ring. Like, and y'all don't like overcharge like on your ticket prices or your snacks, you know, like your drinks. I mean, some places you go, you're going to pay an arm and a leg for a drink, but, you know, not y'all. But anyway, big shout out. Y'all did a stupendous job last night, and we can't wait to go to the next show. And since I'm already talking about it, the next show is going to be held on September 25th in Spartanburg. Now, you can find more details about it on the Pro Wrestling Union Facebook page, but that it's going to be a benefit show. So it's well worth, you know, spending your money on. But I'll link that Facebook page that I mentioned to ours, so it'll be easy for you to find. So
Anyways.
Well, Alice, you ready to talk about this week's episode?
I guess. Episode.
Well, let's do it.
Mystery, murder, and magic, heroes, and
Alright, so now that we got that out of our system, I'm going to do a quick recap just in case you missed anything last week or you just missed the whole episode. So, Aleister was born to these very devout Christian parents, but he rebelled against that and them because of the Christianity. His father died when he was really young, and he called that a life-changing experience. And he inherited a big fortune from his father's death. Now, he attended like several schools, and then he was eventually educated with a private tutor because his behavior was so bad at these schools. I guess they just decided to pull him out. Now, while he was a student at Cambridge University, he was very sexually promiscuous. And during that time, he discovered that he was bisexual. He loved playing chess, and he was very good when it came to mountain climbing. And that's something to discover in college. Yeah. Some years after university, he joined the Golden Dawn, but he was kicked out when he and his mistress tried to seize a temple at the request of his friend Mr. Mathers. And that's in no relation to Marshall Mathers or Jerry Mathers, that was known as Leave It to Beaver Dude. Okay, so I just want to clarify that. In 1903, Aleister married a girl by the name of Rose Kelly, and while they were honeymooning in Cairo, Egypt, he had this sort of an awakening that, and he got in touch with a deity or the spirit named Alwas, I believe was his name, and when he was in contact with that, it gave him what he needed and prompted him to write the Book of Law. Well, in 1905, he had his first daughter, but she died shortly after that from typhoid. Then he had a second daughter who was born in 1907, and she was named, okay, and get this, after an actress that Aleister had an affair with. He named his kid after a woman that he had been messing around with. That brings us up to speed, and we can continue on. So at this point in Aleister's life, he was performing these rituals. With his former mentor. His name was George Cecil Jones. And Aleister claimed that by doing this, he established with Godhead. And he said this was a major... I thought I heard our Alexa. He said this was a major turning point in his life. Damn, I said her name. I'm surprised she didn't come on.
Alright.
But anyway, this was a major turning point in his life. Y'all see how easily distracted I am. And when they would perform these rituals, they would heavily use hashish, which is basically a drug made by compressing and processing certain parts of the cannabis plant. As a matter of fact, he wrote an essay called The Psychology of Hashish. It's hard to say, hashish. That the drug was truly a big help when it came to mysticism. I bet it was. Towards the end of 1907, he says that he was contacted again by Aleister, and Aleister dictated 2 more texts to him. Dude had a lot to say, huh?
Yeah.
And both of these would be later known as the Holy Books of the Thelema. Before that year ended, Aleister wrote several more additions to this, and he claimed that he had supernatural help with this, saying that the supernatural was his source. Now, around this time, his inheritance from all those years ago when his dad passed away was starting to run out. So to earn money, he was hired by George Bennett to protect him from witchcraft. But Aleister realized that Bennett's paranoia over witchcraft was because he was like addicted to cocaine really bad. And so it caused his paranoia, and Alex is laughing, but
that's funny.
it's not funny.
I can't say that word. It's not funny.
It's sad, but it just, when you say that, like, he realized his paranoia was because of it. I mean, he's freaking out about witchcraft because he's high on cocaine. But anyway, so Aleister took this man to France and Morocco to help him, like, get off of those drugs, or get off that drug. Now, one of these students, he took on, like, these other students, too, that, to help them, like, learn about the occult and magic, and so that he could earn money in return. And one of these students was a guy by the name of Victor Newberg. And Mr. Newberg became Aleister's sex partner. And in 1908, the two visited northern Spain, and then they traveled to Morocco. And the next year, the two stayed at Bolskine, which was a house that Aleister owned. And the two practiced sadomasochism. And Aleister continued to write poetry and attempted to write an autobiography called The World's Tragedy. And around this time, he realized that short horror stories were a popular thing. So he started writing his own. That's one thing I'm going to look into, is to see what these were. And some of those are even published. So like I said, I'm going to check those out. But let's go back to 1907 for a minute. Now, in 1907, Aleister and George Cecil Jones decided to form an occult order with the basis that it was a successor to the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and they called it the AA. Their headquarters and temple was located on Victoria Street in central London, and it used a lot of the teachings and beliefs of the Golden Dawn with added touches from the Thelemic ideals. It was quite popular from the beginning, and many people joined. In 1909, Aleister started producing a biannual publication called the Equinox, and he built it to become the official organ of the AA. And later in 1909, Aleister, now see, up until this time, he was still with Rose. But he had had enough of her drinking, and so he divorced her. But he left the little girl Lola in her care. And the couple remained friends, and she continued living at Bolskine until her alcoholism reached like an all-new high, and she was institutionalized in the fall of 1911. God. So I feel like he still cared about her. He was pretty much taking care of her because he gave her a place to live. And then when her drinking was just way beyond control, he had her institutionalized to try to get help. Mm-hmm. So I feel like he did. He cared about her, but he just couldn't deal with her drinking, you know. Now, shortly after his divorce, Aleister and Newberg traveled to places such as Algeria, and they took several desert tours at different places. Aleister recited the Quran every day of the trip, and as we all know, the Quran is basically, in a nutshell, the Bible of Islam. In 1910, when he returned to London, he found out that Mathers was suing him for publishing Secrets of the Golden Dawn in the Equinox. Y'all, I just woke up from a nap. But anyway, when it went to court, the court ruled in favor of Aleister. During the court proceedings, the press really sensationalized it all, and then that in turn made Aleister even more popular, and he enjoyed all the attention. And he really played up the stereotype of being a Satanist and as being a supporter of human sacrifice. But in reality, he was neither of those things. He didn't support human sacrifice, and he said he wasn't a Satanist. Now, all the publicity brought in a lot of new members for the AA, and Aleister decided to expand his teachings to a bigger group of spectators, so he developed something called the Rites of Artemis. And what that was a public performance of magic and symbolism. And his members of AA, now we're not talking about like Alcoholics Anonymous, this is a totally different AA. But anyway, members of AA portrayed different deities, and the first performance was held at the AA temple. Well, the people that attended to watch were given this fruit punch that was spiked, and I believe I'm pronouncing this right, but it was spiked with peyote.
With P.
To enhance their experience. And what peyote is a type of cactus, and there's a drug that's derived from it that contains psychoactive alkaloids. So it was to enhance their experience while watching this production. Now, Aleister received like almost rave reviews. So the following fall, he produced something similar called Rites of Eleusis. I think that's how you pronounce it. Eleusis.
Yeah,
but it wasn't the success that the previous production had been. And the editor of the newspaper called The Looking Glass, called Aleister one of the most blasphemous and cold-hearted villains of modern times. The article he wrote about it suggested that Aleister and Jones were involved in homosexual activity. Now, Aleister didn't mind him saying all this, but Jones sued the man for libel. And after this, Aleister Newberg went back to Algeria to practice more magic work. And later, they went to Paris, or at least Aleister went to Paris, and he met a lady by the name of Mary Dasty. And she became his next Scarlet Woman, and the two of them practiced magic in St. Moritz. And he even believed that one of the chiefs named Apple juice. Anyway, Applediz was speaking through Mary. And based on what she had said was while she was in a trance, and he wrote, look, I'm just going to start that part over.
Let's just start
because it makes absolutely no sense what I just told y'all. Okay, so he saw this chief named Applediz, and he was speaking through Mary, and while she was like in a trance, and he wrote what was a book called Book 4. And I should tell you here that it was during this time that he began spelling magic as M-A-G-I-C-K, like we spell it in the name of our podcast.
Get it?
To differentiate between the paranormal phenomenon type of magic and on stage pulling a rabbit out of a track magic, M-A-G-I-C. So he did that. He added that K on the end of magic to differentiate between magic and magic.
Magic.
If that makes sense.
Magic.
Magic and magic.
Magic.
In the early part of 1912, Aleister published the Book of Lies, and a German occultist named Theodor Roos accused Aleister of publishing some secrets of his own occult order. But Aleister convinced him that it was just a coincidence, and then the two became friends. I think it's nice when people work out things like that, don't you, Alex?
Yeah.
Now, the occult order that was Roos's was called the OTO. And soon after the two became friends, Roos appointed Aleister as the head of the British branch of the OTO. And And that branch was called the Mysteria Mystica Maxima. And at a ceremony in Berlin, Aleister picked the magical name of Baphomet, and he was proclaimed as ex-Supreme Rex and Sovereign Grand Master General of Ireland, Iona, and all of the Britons. All of the Britons.
All of them. Every single one.
Aleister got busy advertising the MMM and rewriting many of its rituals with Roos's permission, of course. But before he rewrote the rituals, they were heavily based. I feel sorry for the people who have listened to this. They were heavily based on Freemasonry, but when he got done with them, they were more Thelemic, and this caused a stir within the organization. Now, we all know how sexual Aleister was, so he was very fascinated by the OTO's attention to sex magic. So Aleister came up with magical workings based on anal sex.
Of course, why
Of
not?
course he did, right? And worked it into the curriculum for the OTO members who had been initiated into the 11th degree of the order. Yeah. In the spring of 1913, Aleister was the producer of the Ragged Ragtime Girls, and that was a group of all-female
Violinist.
There you go. You want to come do this?
No.
Because I sure ain't doing too good. Okay. But as Alex said, they were all-female violinists that
I feel like that's still not right.
It's violinists. They performed in London, and then they did a 6-week stint in Moscow. Well, while they were in Moscow, Aleister took part in a sadomasochistic relationship with Annie Ringler. But that's not all he did while he was in Moscow. He also wrote plays and poetry that included Hymn to Pan and Gnostic Mass. And Gnostic Mass was a Thelemic ritual that became a part of OTO ceremony. The following January, Aleister and
New York.
I feel like I should just start this whole thing over. Alex looked at me like, no, keep going, Mom. We like making fun of you. But anyway, the following January, Aleister and Newberg moved into an apartment in Paris, and for 6 weeks, they performed the Paris Working. And what the Paris Working was a very impassioned ritual that used strong drugs and invoked the gods Mercury and Jupiter. Sex magic was part of this ritual, and at times they were joined by a journalist named Walter Duranty. Alice was inspired by the results of this ritual, and he wrote a book called Liber Agave, and that meant an essay on sex magic. But after that, Newberg started distancing himself from Aleister, and when they had an argument, Aleister cursed him, and I'm not talking about like curse as in a cuss word. I'm talking about he put a hex on Newberg.
Oh.
So there's that.
There's that.
Now that brings us to 1914. And by now, Aleister is basically dirt poor.
He's poor.
And he's living off of donations from the AA and due payments that were made to the OTO. Well, for financial reasons, in May of that year, he deeded over the ownership of the Bolskine house to the MMM. And by summer, he was mountain climbing.
Oh.
You sign over your house and then you go mountain climbing. Well, it was in this time that the First World War broke out.
The first one.
The first one.
The very first one.
Now, he had a short illness, and after he recovered from it, he sailed to the U.S. When he arrived in New York City, he moved into a hotel and started writing for Vanity Fair. That's still a magazine to this day, I believe. He also earned some money by doing freelance work for an astrologer named Evangeline Adams. He professed to be of Irish descent and said he was a supporter of Irish independence from Britain. He took up support in Germany in their war against Britain and became heavily involved in New York's pro-German movement. A German spy named George Sylvester Viereck hired Aleister to write for his paper called The Fatherland. Years later, this brought Aleister under much scrutiny, and he was called a traitor for his stance against Britain. But in reality, he was working as a double agent, and at one point, he carried out a publicity stunt right in front of the Statue of Liberty. Now, his intention was to make the German lobby look nuts in the U.S.'s eyes, and some have even said that it encouraged the German Navy, or that he encouraged the German Navy to destroy the Lusitania, that was like a passenger ship, by telling them it would ensure that the U.S. would stay out of the war. But he was actually hoping that it would bring the U.S. into the war as an ally for Britain.
Okay.
Around that time, he entered into a relationship with Jean Robert Forrest, and together they toured the West Coast. The North America headquarters for the OTO was located in Vancouver, and it was there that he met Charles Stansfield Jones and Wilfred Talbot Smith to discuss spreading thelema across the continent. When he returned to New York, he became friends with Ananda. Now, this name, I'm going to tell you, it's a hard one, but I'm going to do my best to bring this name
Your
to you.
absolute best.
His first name was Ananda, Ananda, but his last name is Kumaraswamy.
I agree. This is what I agree.
And his wife, Alice Richardson. Well, Aleister and Alice did some sex magic.
You.
Well, soon after that, she realized that she was pregnant.
Pregnant.
But then she miscarried the baby.
Aw.
Later on that same year, he took what was called a magical retirement in a lake cabin.
He magically retired.
I would like to do
He's
that.
a magician.
But anyway, he went to a lake cabin owned by Evangeline Adams. While he was there, he was heavily into drugs and he took part in a ritual. And after that ritual, he announced himself as Master Therion.
Oh.
He also wrote a few literary works while there, including a written criticism called The Gospel According to Bernard Shaw. Well, that winter, he moved to New Orleans, which he said was his favorite U.S. city. And at some point after that, he moved in with a lady named Roddy Minor, who would become his next Scarlet Woman. The two performed rituals, and through these rituals, he believed they had contacted a preternatural being called Lamb. His relationship with Roddy ended shortly after that. In 1918, Aleister decided to take a magical retreat on this island that was on the Hudson River. Once he was back in New York, he moved to Greenwich Village, and he took this lady named Leah.
Yeah.
Her name's Leah Herzig. Y'all, I'm so sorry. As his lover and his next Scarlet Woman. He took up painting as a hobby and displayed his artwork at the Greenwich Village Liberal Club. And somewhere along the way, he got the sympathy of the Freemasons, and with their financial assistance, he revived the Equinox.
Correct.
He spent the middle part of 1919 on a mountain. It's like every time he gets ready to do something, like every time he does something financially, it's like then he's got to go climb a mountain. But anyway, he was on a mountain climbing vacation in Montauk, and in December he returned to London. Well, when he got to London, this tabloid writer decided to attack him, not physically, but in the tabloid paper, saying that he was a traitorous scum because of his work with the German war effort. Some of his friends urged him to sue the paper, but he decided it wasn't in his interest to pursue that. And he became very sick with asthma, so a doctor prescribed heroin for it. And Aleister became addicted to it. In January of 1920, he moved to Paris and he rented a house with Leah. And it was around this time that he started tossing around the idea of a community of followers of Thelema, and he called it the Abbey of Thelema. He chose a location in Sicily, Italy, and soon after arriving there, he started renting the Villa Santa Barbara as the abbey for his commune. After moving there with Leah and another woman named Ninette Shumway, along with Shumway's children, he described their life as his idea of heaven. They wore robes, and at several preset times throughout the day, they would perform rituals to the sun god Ra, and occasionally they would perform the Gnostic Mass. The rest of the day, they could pretty much do whatever they wanted, so Aleister continued to write and paint. And as far as the children's education, he was quite the libertine about it. And he even allowed them to witness sex magic.
That's so weird still.
It's an odd thing, yeah. Sometimes he would visit Palermo to visit supplies, and those supplies included drugs, and he would visit male prostitutes while he was there. His drug addiction was at an all-time high at this point, including his use of heroin and cocaine had started rotting out his nasal cavity. They really weren't doing much cleaning at that commune either, and there was like wild dogs and cats running in and out of it, which contributed to the mess of making it nasty, and it became like unsanitary.
Yeah.
New members had started arriving to join them and be educated by Aleister, and one of the new people that showed up was an actress named Jane Wolfe. She moved there in July of 1920. And shortly afterwards, she was initiated into the AA, and she became Aleister's secretary. Another new member was a man named Cecil Frederick Russell, and he didn't agree with the same-sex magic, so they would often get into arguments, him and Aleister. And after only being there for like a year, Russell left the commune because they just couldn't get along. Well, in February of 1922, Aleister traveled back to Paris to attempt to kick his drug habit, but unfortunately he wasn't successful. He was getting desperate for money, so he moved on to London, where he wrote a novel and an article for the English Review. He was strongly criticized by the Sunday Express for his novel, and they called for that book to be burned.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Later, a young follower of Thelema named Raoul Loveday and his wife Betty May, they moved to the commune. Loveday was a staunch supporter of Aleister's, but Betty May couldn't stand him, and she couldn't stand living at the commune either. Oh, and I can imagine if it was still unsanitary, I wouldn't want to live there neither. But anyway, while they were there, her husband, Mr. Loveday, he got a liver infection from drinking there was a stream that was contaminated with Lord knows what. But he got a liver infection from drinking out of it, and he died. Well, when she returned to London, she began to tell her stories to the press. She told of having to drink the blood of a sacrificed cow, and there was other atrocities that she told them about. John Bull, now he wasn't an actual person, but a personification in England, called Aleister the wickedest man in the world and a man we'd like to hang. Aleister said that the accusations were lies and slanderous, but he was broke and he couldn't afford the legal fees to sue. Well, Mussolini heard of what Aleister had going on there, so he had him deported.
Oh, God.
Which was, not a bad thing, because he had people living in bad conditions.
Mm-hmm.
And people died because of it, or at least one person died because of it. But after he was deported, he and Leah went to Tunis, and he was still in bad health, but he was trying again to give up his drug addiction. But again, he was unsuccessful, and during this time, he began writing the Confessions of Aleister Crowley, which was like an autobiography. Well, fast forward a couple of years.
Whoa, we fast forwarded 2 years.
Hello.
That was crazy.
I know.
Whoa.
Well, Aleister claimed that Roos had named him the head of the OTO if and when Roos passed away. But this was soon challenged by a German OTO leader named Heinrich Trenker. At a conference in Germany, prominent leaders Karl Germer and Martha Kunzel pushed for Aleister's leadership, but others were backing Trenker, and this caused the OTO to split. Well, Aleister moved back to Paris in 1926 and took on a ton of lovers during this time. His health started declining, and most of this was brought on by his addictions to heroin and cocaine. Around this time, Aleister also wrote Magic in Theory and in Practice, but it didn't receive much attention at that time. That same year, he met a lady from Nicaragua named Maria Teresa Sanchez. But soon, he was deported again from Paris. So, I mean, it's like everywhere he was going at that time, he was deported. But the reason he got deported from Paris was because authorities there just didn't like his reputation. And they were also afraid that he might possibly be a German spy. Well, Maria couldn't join Aleister in Britain unless they were married, so they got married in August of 1929. Shortly after that, Mandrake published and agreed to publish his autobiography in a limited edition 6-volume set. They also published his novel called Moonchild and also a book of short stories that he had written. But before all the Confessions by Crowley could be published, Mandrake went into bankruptcy, and in a plot twist to all of this, the owner of Mandrake, who was a man named P.R. Stephenson, wrote a book called The Legend of Aleister Crowley based on the press coverage that surrounded Aleister. In September of 1930, Aleister traveled to Lisbon in Portugal to meet with the poet Fernando Pessoa. And while he was there, guess what he did, Alex?
What did he do, Mother?
I thought it would be a good idea to fake his own death. For what reason, I don't know. I couldn't find what reason he had. But now, I mean, if you're doing those drugs, you don't really have to have a reason to do anything. So he got that poet named Fernando Pessoa to help him. And he did this at the Boca do Inferno, which is a rock formation in Portugal. But then he reappeared 3 weeks later at an exhibition of his art in Berlin. 3 weeks later, he's alive.
Three.
In 1931, he moved on to a new lover named Bertha Bush.
Bertha.
What is wrong with
My
you?
name is Bertha.
Well,
I don't like that name.
Well, that is just mean.
I'm joking. If all our Bertha fans are there, I'm sorry. I love you. Continue.
Well, anyway.
You didn't hear that.
God, Alex.
Stupid.
I'm never going to financially recover from this.
Welcome.
They had a very brutal relationship, and often they would attack each other. I just imagine, like, and in this corner, Bertha, and they ring the bell and they fight. But anyway, he would continue to have multiple affairs with both women and men. And soon he left Bertha and went to London, where he took Pearl Brocksmith as his next Scarlet Woman. At this point, Aleister was getting desperate for money again, so he launched a bunch of lawsuits where he claimed people had libeled him, and some of those cases were successful. One of the most famous
Correct.
court cases
Okay.
out of this was when he was suing Constable and Company for publishing a book called The Laughing Torso. Aleister claimed that the book libeled him by saying that his occult practices were black magic, so he got upset and sued over that. Well, he lost that case.
He did.
So instead of making money from all of these court cases, it further messed up his financial issues. Like, it made it worse. By 1935, he was declaring bankruptcy.
Correct.
Alice, you act like you know all this.
I'm smart.
Sounds like plankton over there. Correct. During the hearing for his bankruptcy, it was told that he had been spending 3 times his actual income. Sounds a lot like me, don't he? Spend more than you got, because it ain't gonna do you no good to be here anyway. Okay. What is that? after this, Aleister developed a friendship with a lady named Deidre Patricia.
Deidre.
Alex!
That's a funny name!
It's not funny.
Deidre?
I'm not cooking you any supper.
Okay.
Anyway, he became friends with a
like that
lady named Deidre Patricia Doherty. And she just offered him to have a baby for him.
Whoa!
It's very personal. But anyway, the baby boy was born in May of 1937, and they named him Randall.
Rant.
In 1937, he gave a series of public lectures on yoga in Soho,
Yoga.
and he was mostly living off of contributions by the OTO's Lodge in California. It was also around this time that Aleister became fascinated with the rise of Nazism in Germany, and he believed that Hitler just might convert to Thelema when the Nazis ended the German OTO and imprisoned his friend Germer, who later ran away to the U.S. And yet another plot twist,
Whoa.
Aleister verbally attacked Hitler. That's pretty brave, I think. And called him a practitioner of black magic. In 1940, Aleister's asthma got a lot worse. And this is something that I can sympathize with because I have asthma too, and it's a struggle. And like since it's been so hot and humid lately, oh my Lord, it's just a struggle to breathe. And it's one of those things that I wouldn't even wish like on my worst
Enemy.
really. But because of World War II, Aleister couldn't get his asthma medicine that was produced in Germany. So guess what? He started using asthma. I mean,
He used
he started
asthma.
using heroin again. Now, I didn't know that heroin had ever been used to treat asthma. I mean, I'm not interested in like using the that for my asthma.
Using the asthma.
I'm not. But anyway, when he started using it again to treat his asthma, he got addicted again.
Addicted.
But I'm sure, I mean, I hate to, like, be understanding of it, but, I mean, if he couldn't get his regular medicine because of the war, I mean, I can understand why he did it, because he had to have something to relieve him from his asthma, you know?
Yeah.
Well, when Germany started bombing London, Aleister temporarily relocated to Torquay, and while he was there, he was hospitalized for his asthma. So, see, it was pretty bad. When he returned to London, he met up with an OTO initiate named Lady Frida Harris, and they began plans to design a tarot deck. He came up with the actual like design, and she painted them.
Ooh, color.
Yeah. In 1944, he took up residence at the Netherwood boarding house. Over the next couple of years, he had a lot of visitors come to see him there, including Deidre Doherty and their son, Randall. But he also made some new friends there. And that's where he spent out the rest of his life, because on December the 1st, 1947, Aleister passed away at the age of 72 there at that boarding house. He had been suffering from chronic bronchitis, which was exacerbated by pleurisy and myocardial degeneration. Now, I'm not sure what that was. His funeral service was held on December 5th at the crematorium, where Lewis Wilkinson read selections from Gnostic Mass, the Book of the Law, and Hymn to Pan. The funeral was attended by about a dozen people. And listen, Alex, this is the part I really want you to pay attention to and see if you can make the link.
Ooh, okay.
The press dubbed it as the Black Mass.
I get it.
You get it? Okay. So, do you see what I was talking about? Aleister / Malachi Black. When we were talking before we started recording, I told you, I was like, there's something I want you to see if you can make the connection. And there it is. So, that's where Black Mass came from. And you see his name was out. They called him Aleister when he was in that other promotion, which we dare not name. His body was cremated, and his ashes were sent to Carl Germer, who was still in the United States. And Germer he burned his he buried his ashes in his garden. Now, like I said last week when we first started talking about Aleister, I told you he was a very interesting man. I told you there was a lot to the man. I mean, his life was literally multifaceted. I'm not sure if I should have been afraid of him instead of being fascinated by him. I mean, he's not into stuff that I would do, but I can see some of his way of thinking, and he was just totally different than people of his time. He's totally different than most of the people of our time now. I think when people think differently, I think people are afraid of people that think different than them.
Yeah.
So, that's basically what was going on with Aleister. So, anyway, that is all I have about Aleister. Now, I did probably leave some stuff out, but like I said, there's a lot to this man. There's several interesting books about Aleister if you want to read more about him. But that's all I've got for today. Alex, you got anything to add at this point? No.
Well, she was right.
Huh?
You're right.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Okay. Well, since Alex has nothing to say, I'm going to wrap it up. Come back on Wednesday for the Midweek Mini and on Saturday for the Weekend Weird Files. I don't know what we're talking about on either one of those yet, but I'm sure it'll be cool. Y'all keep it freaky out there, y'all.